Sophie's heart slammed against her ribs as Lucian's piercing gaze locked onto hers. He knew. He knew the secret she'd kept buried for years. The Mafia boss, the man she betrayed. And now, he was demanding the truth. What happened when the lies unraveled and there was nowhere left to hide? Sophie wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to be standing in the same room as Lucian Salvatore, the man she'd spent years running from. Yet, there she was, trying to pass herself off as nothing more than a waitress in a high-end restaurant. But Lucian's eyes locked onto hers, and she knew. The life she'd tried so hard to forget wasn't done with her yet. He'd found her. And now, he wanted the truth. If you're captivated by this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join a community of fellow story lovers. Your support helps us craft even more thrilling, emotional tales that you'll love. Don't miss out. Stay connected and be the first to explore the next chapter of this unforgettable journey. She froze, one hand still clutching a glass of water, the other betraying her by trembling slightly. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She'd built this life from the ground up, reinventing herself as Sophia Davis, a quiet, inconspicuous personal assistant. No one there knew about her past, the life she'd left behind, the secret she buried, the betrayal that still haunted her.
But Lucian, he saw through the mask.
His gaze, cold and unyielding, never wavered. And for a moment, she swore she could feel the weight of every mistake, every lie, crashing down on her. The restaurant seemed to shrink, the noise fading to a dull hum as everything in her screamed to run. But she couldn't.
Not now.
She hadn't seen him in years. The last time was when she walked away from the Mafia world and swore she'd never look back. Lucian Salvatore, the son of the notorious Gavino D'Angelo, was not a man you crossed. And she had crossed him. Lucian was no stranger to power. He exuded it with every step, every movement. His dark eyes scanned the room with ease, assessing the people around him. But the second they met hers, it was like a jolt of electricity passed between them. A recognition she hadn't expected. The air around them shifted, charged, and the subtle pressure of his presence pinned her in place. He moved toward her with the kind of grace that only those who had everything could manage, the kind of men who controlled entire cities with a glance. He didn't rush, but every step he took felt deliberate, calculated. Her heart began to hammer in her chest as he approached, and for a fleeting moment, she thought about bolting, disappearing into the kitchen. But she stayed rooted, too terrified of what would happen if she did. When he reached the counter, he didn't speak at first. He just studied her, the faintest hint of recognition in his expression. Then, in that low, steady voice that sent shivers down her spine, he said, "I didn't expect to see you here." The words were simple, but there was an edge to them. She couldn't find her voice at first, and then she finally whispered, "I'm just a waitress." Lucian's lips curled into a knowing smile, but there was nothing warm about it. "Funny," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't think you're just a waitress, Sophie." Her stomach flipped, and she felt a cold sweat break out on the back of her neck. He knew. He knew exactly who she was. The name she had left behind, the life she had erased, was suddenly right there in front of her. And she was back in the crosshairs. "I don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, but her voice cracked under the pressure. There was no hiding now. Lucian leaned in closer, the intensity of his gaze never faltering. 6 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's been 6 years, and yet, I still remember you." She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to flee. The game she'd played, hiding, reinventing herself, was over. Lucian Salvatore was back in her life, and she had no idea how much he knew, or how deep this game would go. She wasn't sure if she could survive a second round. His eyes flicked over her, assessing. "I never forget a face, Sophie. And I think it's time we had a little conversation." 6 years ago, Sophie had made a choice that still haunted her. The decision to betray Lucian's father. She didn't want to remember it, didn't want to think about it, but as she stood in front of Lucian, with those icy eyes watching her, she could feel the weight of the past crushing down on her again. Back then, she had no choice. It was her life or theirs. But the truth? That was something she hadn't told anyone. And Lucian? He had every intention of uncovering it, no matter how much she wanted to keep it buried. Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that Lucian was still watching her, even after he'd left the restaurant. His words had echoed in her mind all night. "We need to talk." She'd hoped it was a passing threat, something he said in the heat of the moment. But she knew better. Lucian Salvatore didn't forget. And he certainly didn't leave things unresolved. As she scrubbed the dishes in the back of the kitchen, her hands moved mechanically, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the night 6 years ago, when everything had changed, the night she made the choice that would haunt her forever. She had been desperate, scared, and alone. Her father, a trusted lieutenant in Gavino D'Angelo's organization, had put her in a position where she had no choice. The authorities had come to her, offering a deal she couldn't refuse: information about Lucian's father. In exchange, she would be kept safe, her family spared. She'd known the cost of betrayal, but there was no way out. Her heart had been heavy with guilt, but she had made the choice. And the following morning, Lucian's father was arrested. The empire crumbled. She still remembered the cold look in his father's eyes when the authorities closed in. She hadn't been able to look him in the eye after that. She didn't even try to reach out to Lucian. She couldn't. She'd kept her head down for years after that, changing her name, moving cities, working odd jobs. But she never forgot the look on his face, the anger and betrayal that had consumed him. And now, standing before her in the restaurant, Lucian's presence stirred up those memories like a flood. She had hoped time would erase the scars. She had hoped that Lucian would forget. But he didn't. His eyes had drilled into her, and she had seen that same pain and fury that had been in his father's. He wasn't just there to catch up. No, Lucian was there for answers. She felt the walls around her closing in, suffocating her. Lucian's suspicion wasn't something she could easily dismiss. He wasn't the type to ask questions without knowing the answers already. She had no doubt that he was probing for details, searching for cracks in the story she'd carefully constructed. And the more she tried to hide, the more she could feel him inching closer to the truth. He had already figured out she wasn't the innocent bystander she pretended to be. He knew she had played a role in his family's downfall, and he was relentless in his pursuit of the truth. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather herself. She had gotten good at hiding, but the longer Lucian lingered in her life, the more impossible it would be to keep the past locked away. She had betrayed him, betrayed his family. And the worst part? She had no way of undoing it. Lucian would never forgive her. Not for the things she had done. And certainly not for the things he still didn't know. The truth was beginning to surface, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it from drowning her. The moment Sophie saw him walk through the back door of the restaurant, her stomach dropped. Lucian. He didn't even need to speak. His presence alone was enough to make the air around them feel thick, suffocating. Her pulse quickened, and she braced herself for what she knew was coming. She tried to keep her focus on the dishes she was washing, avoiding his gaze, but she could feel him closing in on her. The scrape of her scrubbing brush against the sink echoed through the quiet kitchen, but it did nothing to drown out the racing beat of her heart. Sophie. His voice was like cold steel, smooth and dangerous, sending a shiver down her spine. She froze, the brush still in her hand. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. He stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the smell of soap and stale food in the air. She could feel the heat from his body radiating toward her, and she knew there was no way out now. He had cornered her in every possible sense of the word. "You've been avoiding me," Lucian said, his tone casual, though his eyes were cold with intent. "That's not going to work, Sophie. You can't hide from me." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I'm not hiding from you. I'm just busy." He smirked, a dark, knowing smile that sent a tremor through her. "Don't lie. You've been running ever since I walked through that door. But it's over now. I'm done waiting. I need answers." She felt the walls she'd built around herself start to crumble. Her hands were shaking now, the scrubbing brush slipping from her grip.
She didn't know what to say.
Didn't know how to keep lying. Lucian stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You betrayed me. You betrayed my father. You were the one who tipped off the authorities, weren't you?" Her heart stopped. She wanted to deny it, wanted to throw out some excuse, anything to deflect the truth. But Lucian wasn't buying it. His gaze was unyielding, like a vice tightening around her. "I know you," he continued, his voice low and controlled, but there was a simmering intensity just beneath the surface. "I've spent years wondering how someone like you could do what you did. I need you to tell me, Sophie.
Why?
Why did you turn on us?" She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She hadn't said it aloud in years. She hadn't even admitted it to herself. But now, with Lucian standing in front of her, his presence demanding the truth, she had no choice but to face it. "I did it to protect myself," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "And my family. I didn't have a choice." Lucian didn't flinch, but his expression darkened. "You think that makes it okay?" His voice dropped, like a low rumble of thunder. "You betrayed us, Sophie. You destroyed everything." "I was scared," she said, the pain of those years flooding back. "I had no other choice. They threatened everything I cared about. My family, my life. I didn't know what else to do." For a long moment, there was silence between them. The weight of her confession hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. Lucian exhaled slowly, his jaw clenched. "You made a choice, and now you'll live with it." But despite the fury in his eyes, she saw something else, something like understanding, though it was barely there. "Tell me, Sophie," he said, his voice softer now, almost imperceptible. "What happens next?" She met his gaze, her heart racing. There was no going back from this. No more lies. No more hiding. The truth had finally come out. Lucian didn't leave Sophie much time to process the weight of her confession. The moment she admitted her betrayal, the atmosphere in the room shifted, as if a new game was beginning. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface of his calm demeanor now seemed to simmer in his words, but it wasn't directed at her. He stepped back, giving her space, though his eyes never left hers. "I'm not here to punish you, Sophie," he said, his voice steady, but there was something more calculating beneath it. "I've had my share of revenge. My father's death is old news." She frowned, confused. "Then why are you here? Why did you drag me back into this mess?" Lucian's gaze darkened, but there was a spark of something else in his eyes.
Power.
Ambition. "The truth is, I'm not after revenge," he said, each word deliberate. "I want my family's empire back. My father's empire." She blinked, trying to make sense of it. The empire that had once been unshakable, but now lay in ruins, splintered into pieces after Lucian's father was taken down. She had thought Lucian would want to destroy the people who betrayed his family, but his tone was surprisingly pragmatic, not filled with vengeance. "The power my father built, it was lost when he was taken. The territory, the connections, everything that made us untouchable," Lucian continued, his voice lowering as he explained his plan. "But I want to rebuild it. Stronger. Bigger. And I need help." She swallowed, unsure where this was leading. "What does that have to do with me?" His lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "You know the criminal world better than most. Your father's ties to Gavino D'Angelo's syndicate your family's influence. It all still matters. You have connections. And more importantly, you have knowledge. You can help me navigate the mess my father left behind. The room felt smaller as Lucian's words sank in. She could feel the pull of his offer, the weight of it. Power, wealth, safety. All things she had tried to escape. But now, standing there with Lucian, she realized they were being dangled in front of her like a drug. The temptation was suffocating. Lucian stepped closer, closing the space between them. His presence was impossible to ignore, overwhelming in the most dangerous way. Help me take control, Sophie. Help me rebuild. I'll protect you from the consequences of your betrayal. I'll make sure no one comes after you for what you did to my father. She froze, torn. The offer was too good, too easy. He was offering her safety, power, the things she had never had, the things she had always wanted. But at what cost? She felt the stirrings of something else, something deeper. The way his words resonated in her. The attraction she had tried so hard to suppress was back, stronger than ever. The chemistry between them was undeniable, but she couldn't let that cloud her judgment. Aligning with Lucian meant stepping back into the world she had spent years escaping. She knew the dangers that came with it, the violence, the manipulation, the lies. I can't go back, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and longing. I've worked too hard to leave that life behind. Lucian's eyes softened, but there was a glint of determination in them. You don't have to go back, Sophie. This time, you'll do it on your own terms. She looked at him, torn between fear and temptation. His offer was a lifeline, but it could also pull her into the very depths of the world she had vowed to escape. Think about it, he said, his voice low and compelling. We could build something together. Something none of us has ever had. And in that moment, she knew she was at a crossroads. The past, the present, and the future all collided, leaving her with a choice she never thought she'd have to make. The days following Lucian's offer felt like a fever dream, Sophie's mind spinning between temptation and fear. Each encounter with him was laced with the same suffocating pull, and yet, she couldn't bring herself to step away. The tension between them was palpable, heavy, suffocating, a constant force that she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. At first, it was easy to tell herself she was just working. She was helping him rebuild his empire, using her knowledge to navigate the criminal world he was desperate to reclaim. But as the days turned into weeks, the lines between business and personal began to blur. She'd never seen Lucian like this, driven, focused, every inch the man she had once been terrified of. But there was something else, too. Something in the way he looked at her. The intensity in his gaze had shifted, from cold indifference to something far more dangerous. It was no longer just about power. It was about her. He was watching, always watching, waiting for her to make her move. And she couldn't ignore the attraction that was beginning to resurface, despite all her attempts to push it down. The chemistry between them, once driven by betrayal and bitterness, was now something else entirely. A spark had been ignited between them the night they met, and it hadn't gone out, no matter how much she wished it would. She found herself thinking about him when she shouldn't. She couldn't help but notice how his eyes softened when he spoke to her, or how his voice sent an undeniable shiver through her when he whispered her name. His presence was like a magnet, drawing her in even as she tried to resist. But she hated what he represented. Everything she had fought to escape. The violence, the manipulation, the lies. All the things she had hoped would never touch her again. Lucian was a reminder of everything she had run from, everything that had ruined her family. And yet, in a twisted way, she still felt something for him. Something she couldn't control. It wasn't long before Lucian began pushing her further into his world, demanding more of her loyalty. She wasn't just his ally anymore. She was his partner. His equal. At least, that's what he said. But the deeper she went into his plans, the more she realized how much control he had over her. Every choice she made felt like it was leading her further into his grasp. She had hoped he would give her space to breathe, to make her own choices. But he didn't. Lucian wasn't interested in her autonomy. He wanted her. He wanted her loyalty, her trust, and her heart. One evening, he called her to his penthouse, a place she had grown all too familiar with. The air was thick with anticipation when she stepped inside. Lucian was already waiting for her, leaning against the wall with that predatory smile of his. "I think it's time, Sophie," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Time for you to decide." "Decide what?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "Whether you're with me or against me," Lucian said, his eyes dark and knowing. "I'm done waiting. No more hesitation." His words were sharp, cutting through the confusion she had been drowning in. She had been holding back, unsure of where her loyalties should lie, but she knew now that he wasn't going to let her stay in limbo. His demand was clear. Choose him, choose his world, or walk away forever. But there was no going back once she made that choice. And she was starting to realize something. No matter what she told herself, she had already chosen. The night was thick with tension as Lucian and Sophie stood across from each other in his penthouse, the weight of his words hanging heavily between them. The city lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows flickered like 1,000 eyes, watching, judging, waiting for her response. Lucian was standing near the bar, his posture relaxed, but the sharpness in his eyes told a different story. There was no more room for hesitation. He had been patient long enough, but tonight, that patience had worn thin. He was done with waiting for her to decide. "You've had your time to think, Sophie," he said, his voice cool, yet there was an edge to it that sent a chill through her. "Now, the time for decisions is here." She swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of her past pressing in on her, suffocating her. She had spent years running, hiding from the world she had once known. And now, it was staring her in the face, offering her two choices: embrace the dangerous world Lucian was offering, or turn her back on him and everything they could become. But it wasn't that simple, was it? There was no easy escape. Lucian's empire was built on blood, on power, on everything she had once despised. And yet, as she stood there in front of him, she knew something had shifted. Despite everything, despite the fear, the conflict, and the danger, she couldn't deny the pull between them. "You're not just asking me to join you, Lucian," she said, her voice low but steady. "You're asking me to change everything, to become someone I'm not, someone I don't want to be." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering.
"No, Sophie."
"I'm asking you to help me make a different kind of world. A world we can control, one where we don't have to hide behind lies and bloodshed. Together, we can rebuild this empire into something that isn't built on cruelty and fear. I don't want to drag you back into the darkness. I want to build something better. With you." His words hung in the air, as though the weight of them had the power to change everything. The empire he spoke of, the one that had ruined so many lives, including hers, could be reshaped. But at what cost? She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been running from this choice for too long, hiding behind her fear, her past. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something deeper. It was about owning her choices, about taking control of her fate. She looked into Lucian's eyes, seeing the sincerity behind his guarded expression. She knew he wasn't lying, but there was a part of her that still resisted. Could she really be a part of the world he was building without losing herself in it? "I'm not going back to the way it was," she said firmly. "But I'll help you. On my terms. We do this differently. No more bloodshed. No more ruthless power games." Lucian's gaze softened, just for a moment, and she could see something in him that she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability.
"Hope."
He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. "Together, then," he said quietly. "We'll do it together." She knew, in that moment, that she had made her decision. Not just as Lucian's ally, but as a woman who had taken control of her destiny. She was done running. She was done hiding. Lucian and Sophie were bound by their shared past, but tonight, they would begin a new chapter. One where she could help shape the future, not as a victim of the life she once lived, but as someone who is finally in control. Together, they would rebuild, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally ready to face whatever came next. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and be part of a community that cherishes unforgettable tales like this one. Your support means more than you know. It fuels the creation of even more stories that speak to the heart. So, whether you're watching from your TV or your phone, take a moment to join us. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us continue bringing these stories to life. Thank you for being a part of this journey.